Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I don't get to do a lot of podcasts. Actually, I don't get to guest on a lot of podcasts. So
You're usually sitting in the driver's seat, and now it's the
no one
roles
ever
are
invites
reversed.
me. I said it on a podcast recently. I'm like, no one ever invites me. Like, I'll always do it. I love it. So yeah.
Excellent, mate. I appreciate you being here. I've read recently and watched a few of your reels and some of your content that your goal is to build a $100 million company. And today I want to explore what it takes to get a brand like LawnHub moving. I want to understand some of the brands that sit inside the Hectagon empire as well, and some key lessons that got us from grassroots to where we are now, and then how we're going to bridge the gap between doing our several $1 million a year turnover up to the 100 piece. So firstly, can you set the scene for us? Unpack this LawnHub empire. What don't we see?
I guess before LawnHub, there was WaterPro, which is a 15 to 17-year-old business. It was interesting. I was talking to one of my staff yesterday who's coming up 15 years, so it's probably closer to a 16 or 17-year-old business. So WaterPro was the first company, and obviously the reason that LawnHub was able to exist, and that was started kind of 09. Yeah, it must be 16, so 08, 09. LawnHub's only 8 years old, coming up 7 or 8 years old. It was a 2018 start. Yeah, 6 years old. I don't measure the time frames very well. I'm generally looking forward more than backwards. But so LawnHub was a bit of an accident. I was trying to grow WaterPro, which is like I said, our flagship business. And there was a guy that had a page on Facebook that was starting to grow. It was in the lawn space. And so I just reached out and asked if we could do some paid boosting or promotional stuff for WaterPro. So, you know what it's like. Like, you kind of...
It's a list hacking strategy.
Yeah, give him some money. He had 8,000 followers. I was like, look, I'll give you $100. You say this. Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And then we started doing that. And then that page kind of grew to 100,000 pretty quickly. And we built a relationship. And he was like, I really think we could start doing, like, selling products. I'm like, I think that's a great idea. So they started a brand selling fertilizer. And then that was growing, and we were selling them in our location. So WaterPro was pretty much the reseller for LawnHub. Then he said, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm out of my depth. Can you, I guess, be a consultant, and I'll give you equity in the company? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, what are you thinking? He goes, I'll give you 20%, and then you just help me do this, do that, do meetings, whatever else. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to do it. 20's too high. Give me 10. I'm not going to do any heavy lifting. I'll come to meetings. I'll give you advice, but I'm not going to pack orders. I'm not going to run accounting. I'm not going to do anything like that.
Not being operational heavy. It's
nothing like that. I couldn't. I had to keep, I guess, between having my family life and my existing work life, the difference between 10 and 20 wasn't enough to be doing all that heavy lifting. 50 maybe, and I would have had my team on it, but not for me. And so that went well. And then it got to a point where the business was kind of valued at, in our minds, 140. We were working on a 3 times multiplier loosely because, it had only really been selling for a year. And he rang me one day and he goes, if you still want to be involved, you need to give me $14,000 for your 10%. And I was like, what? We shook hands. Like, there was a handshake.
There's no shareholder agreements. There was no ASIC lodgements.
Nothing like that. And he still is a police officer. I expected that, you can trust the police. That's what my parents taught me. Obviously, the movies that I've seen.
Not all the lessons ever taught us are true, are they?
No.
In this particular scenario, when money comes into the scame, it can make people change.
It's really interesting, and for a long time, I really resented him for it. And I effectively started LawnHub the next day. Came up with the concept, got the logo design done. We had media staff internally anyway, so I was good to go. Bought the domains. Had a trademarking issue. Didn't understand trademarking very well at the time, and had a supplier jump over me on my own name. Fought that. That's another story I'm happy to talk about. But effectively had LawnHub up and running and was competing with him. So started selling our own fertilizer in our own stores. So we've got retail irrigation stores. So there's an avenue to market there. And then it grew to what is now, well, it's tracking to be a probably $10 million company. But I actually looked at the numbers yesterday because I knew that it might come up. It's last 12 months, it's done 7. But because it's growing so fast, each financial year... We're on a
run rate for 10.
Pretty much. I mean, effectively, if you looked at the last 90 days, we're running at 12, but winter's a very dismal time for irrigation and fertilizer businesses. So yeah, that's LawnHub is my second, it's my second like $10 million business. So WaterPro LawnHub are both that size. And WaterPro is run under management quite well now. We've got a management structure with a general manager, operations manager, store managers. So it's all, that kind of takes care of itself. And LawnHub probably has a bit more involvement from me because I'm the face of LawnHub and, you know, podcasting and all the ads. I don't know if you've seen, now that you've probably got my number in your phone, you'll see all my ads.
Your targeting works.
Yeah. So I spend most of the time on that. And yeah, they've kind of, up until recently, we had a landscape supplies yard as well, which we sold at the end of the financial year. So we were kind of $24 million business towards my $100 million goal.
Yeah.
We sold $6 million of turnover, which was
now
challenging.
You've got work to do.
Well, because my whole life's been about getting to the 100 mil.
Yep.
And I get a lot of criticism from people in the industry and peers. They're like, "What, wouldn't you be focused on bottom line profit?" I'm like, no, top line revenue. It's all I care about. We do have bottom line profit, but
you're not uneducated enough to say that
I'm not doing it at all costs.
revenue of growth for growth's sake. You're still maintaining gross margin, net margin on the way through.
It's just an easy goal. It's an easy publicly facing goal that can be communicated to my team, which never really talks about profit. So, you know, most businesses in my space, if they can get 10% net, they're going to be fine. 15's great. You know, if you can
Almost
start,
every business sits at that.
That's right.
Yep.
Right.
From
If
the
you can
service perspective.
Yeah. And so retail irrigation stores aren't different. You look at someone like Reese Plumbing, who are a competitor of ours in the irrigation space. They might have a higher GP because they've got their own brands that they're bringing in. So, and they've got that scale. So you can obviously get it up. But regardless, if my theory being $100 million, you'll make 10 mil. You know, you probably make 12 or 15 to be honest at 100. But that was just always been the goal. And the whole reason behind the $100 million goal was because I had a goal to do 3 million a while back, and I hit it. And then I went out and celebrated, and I didn't really come back for 12 months. And so we did 3 million again, the next year. And I was like, oh man, I need a real lofty goal. Otherwise,
You treaded water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Gary V, who kind of was the reason I discovered, I guess social media from a content distribution standpoint and podcasting, probably a longer ago than anyone else. Like I've been kind of doing this for 8 years or whatever. He had that goal to buy the New York Jets, and it just made sense to me. And I saw it through the lens of why he was doing it, not so much why he wanted it, but it just keeps you accountable to something so big that you wake up every day and keep working towards it, and then you never stop to go, did it? Because I don't reset that very well. So like I had a weight loss challenge in 16. I lost like 30 kilos. And so the goal was to get under 100. I was like 99.4 for about 3 hours, right? and then I was back to 120 within about a month because I go celebrate.
Yep.
And I'm still celebrating 10 years later. So I think having that $100 million goal kind of just kept my eye on that like longer horizon. It helps with buy-in as well with team members because they can see that there's opportunity.
Correct.
Like,
they know the org chart's
that's
growing.
a big business. Like. Yep. If I can be number two to Clint in a $100 million company, there's probably and I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and you talked about this with one of your other guests about that. It's not always a good idea to go start your own business. Sometimes it's a good idea to become a number two to someone who's doing something quite big. You've hedged all your risk, but you've got a bit of upside, especially if there's an equity play.
You still get almost maximum control.
Yeah, well,
because
you
you
get full
take
control.
so much
My
opinion
GM
from
runs WaterPro. I probably run LawnHub a bit more aggressively, but my ops and my GM run WaterPro.
Yep. They get full, not necessarily control, but they get full right of decision making.
Yeah. They can test their theories, which I think's really all of it. Like you get to try new things and be like, how does that work? Yep, that worked. Let's roll that out. You know.
Yep. The more the company grows, the more profit the company makes, the larger their salary can increase because marginally OPEX increases.
Well, you can't pay a GM $500,000 to run a $4 million company.
Yep.
Just doesn't exist.
Yep.
Right. They might have the same skill set, but there's not the money there. Right. $100 million business. You're gonna have a CEO of some capacity. I'd love that to be guys that have grown inside the company. There could be a $500,000 salary there. That's not at all out of the question. So,
with the WaterPro setup, I want to help the guys understand how to get to the point where you have the free time, capacity, amount of thought or spare time in order to drive a secondary brand? Because there's a couple components here in that a lot of people maybe don't want to let go or can't let go. Then there's also almost every business owner that I talk to has what they refer to as a side hustle, what I refer to as a distraction. So I want to really throw a couple of these things up in the air and see how do we get a company under management, and then how can we pursue something that is still within the circle of competence, but maybe something that's a little bit more passion driven or exciting.
Yep. So I've got about 5 different answers to that sentence. I've never had an issue relinquishing control. I don't want to do that work. And so for me to put people in positions of responsibility has always been easy. I trust early, I hire early, I let them make mistakes. I don't come down on them for those learnings. My GM, so we had one store, we've got 3 retail stores now, Lonsdale, Kent Town and Dry Creek. We had Kent Town exclusively. I think we had Stepney before that. We moved it to Kent Town. Our existing GM was my store manager, I think then, and I'd have to look back on the org chart, but I was the director. So I'm still the managing director, and I still have a very active role in all the companies. I'm not there all the time, but I'm looking at budgets and talking about HR and everything that's involved. But he was the store manager while I was the managing director, and I've forced him into those positions probably selfishly because I didn't want to do it. I don't want to deal with human resources that are at that level, and I'm always happy to take calls and meetings from my staff. In fact, I had lunch with a new staff member prior to this. It's still something that I believe in, but it's his job to deal with that. I let him deal with that, and so it was always easy. And I kind of just make myself absent and unavailable because if I think about it, I don't want to deal with it. And I think that a lot of directors that say they want out, they don't actually want out. They still want to run the business, and it might be because they haven't evolved to a point where they can be an inactive director.
Yep.
Because they love it. It's like the tradie, and I guess you're in this market, you see it all the time. Tradies get into starting a business because it's the next evolution in theory, and they're all great at their art, but they don't understand the science or the maths or the whatever of running the business, and that's why you exist.
Yep.
Well, it's probably not the pure reason you exist, but it's part of your life, right?
I live to teach trades about gross margin.
If I had no clients, I would die. But you know what I mean. And so it's hard for them to exit because I guess they haven't evolved or they haven't moved out of it. I was always happy to kind of move out of it. And don't get me wrong, railways, when we bought that, I was every day. And especially when, April 2019, when we had a lot of changes, I was 30 days straight.
Yep.
And I live an hour from railway, so I'm an hour each way.
Press on the railways for a sec. Was the intention to buy, turn it around, sell it? Was that always the plan?
It was never the plan. So
okay.
I'd never, ever thought of divesting businesses. It was never on my radar. It's kind of like property, right? You don't sell property, you buy property and you accumulate it in theory, unless you're a flipper. But if you're a property investor, every guy that we rent from who's got 20 or 30 buildings, none of them sell buildings.
Yep,
they
buy and
buildings.
hold.
And so it all came from a podcast, funnily enough. I was doing a podcast with Lachlan Jeffries, who owns his 5th generation family-owned business, Jeffries, which is the mulch supplier, mulch soils. I probably don't want to.
If you haven't seen their trucks in Adelaide, then you're not switched on.
You're definitely looking at your phone when you're driving. He and I did a podcast, and I've always really been quite public about my goals, and I think that's I would encourage people to do that because it holds you accountable, but it also has this added benefit that people might try to help you. And because I'm talking about, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. He goes, hey, you've talked about opening an irrigation shop in the south. Would you be open to buying a landscape supplies yard that has an irrigation shop in it and then growing that? And I'm like, that makes complete sense, right? We're buying the business with existing so the existing turnover paid all the wages and the rent. That's all I needed, right? So I didn't have to sink a cost of renting a building with 0 turnover, which I've done now in Lonsdale. So you're kind of losing money for a while. You've still got the debt, but you're breaking even because you're already paying all those wages. And then if you can run that business through my filter, so through my customer service filter, through my training filter, through my culture filter, and actually get that business to operate like yours, which is really hard. And I don't think we perfected it, but we did pretty well. Then you can grow it. Now, having multiple companies, because there was 2 separate companies, selling the same products to different customer bases is quite challenging. And from an accounting standpoint, I mean, I could talk to you about any of it. You kind of probe where you want to go.
Keep going.
We've got custom open source software that was able to have, it would manage. So so WaterPro and Railways had the same customer base, the same inventory file, but separate general ledgers. And so that would all work inside one piece of software, and we could toggle between Railways and WaterPro depending on the store. And you could open like a new warehouse, a digital warehouse, or a point of sale at any location. It's pretty deep, and my IT manager's an absolute legend, and he's been with me nearly 10 years. I'm going to guess probably 8. But Railways was never like seller. It was always, that's going to be part of my platform and part of my life, to the extent where we had an app developed that it's probably a $200,000 piece of software sitting on a server that doesn't get used, which you would call Uber Dirt or Uber Landscape if you were to legally use that name, which I get in enough trouble with LawnHub. So it was my belief that was going to be another avenue. I was going to buy landscape suppliers yards. I was going to own irrigation shops, landscape suppliers yards, in some cases together. And irrigation's a really good way for landscape suppliers yards to increase their profitability because the GP is better. And so that was the plan. But then, we didn't own the land. The landlord was super hungry for rent. Like, we were having aggressive increases. And I inherited a lease, so there wasn't much I could do about it.
There's no relationship there to stand on.
No, and he didn't care. Like, I reckon, like, that landlord would take, like, dollars to weddings as his +1. Like, he didn't have... It wasn't about people. It was
in it to
money,
win it for
money,
sure.
money. And good on him, whatever works for you. I don't find that as my main driver, if in my top 5, to be honest. But as we started to understand that business and the cost of rent, the risk, the amount of clutches trucks go through is just ridiculous, especially when you've got people driving in the hills with, because our yard was below Aberfoyle Park, Flagstaff Hill kind of area.
So going straight into the Adelaide Ranges.
Yeah, and the boys at Adelaide Hills are going to deal with the same thing. They're going to be having trucks that are loaded to capacity driving up hills with drivers taking off in second gear, even though they've been told multiple times by the manufacturer, first gear's there for a reason. They're going through clutches, 7-day-a-week business, high wages. We had amazing staff there, so that was probably one saving grace. Like, everyone that we had when we started there was still there when we sold. So that was a saving grace. But I do know of yards, because I worked at another landscape yard for 5 years before I started WaterPro. So I'm across the business. That was probably another reason, like, I was across the business. But hiring drivers and keeping them and having reliable drivers is really challenging. And, that would be advice I give landscape suppliers yards. If you get good drivers, just give them what they need to stay with you.
Because then you keep the trucks running.
And it doesn't have to be money, but give them money matters. There's a level where it has to be, but give them the things they need around comfort and support and flexibility. Sometimes, drivers tend to have diverse needs outside of work, and sometimes shit goes down. You just have to kind of be understanding. But we had a great crew. Like, that's something I didn't think about when selling was the emotional toll that they're not my guys anymore. And so I don't get...
cut an arm off?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess I would imagine it's like what happens when your kids get married or move out or move to, like, go to uni in America and you just don't see them for a year. Like, it's really weird. I would imagine it's what it's like when you, on a smaller scale, if you get divorced and you've got custody of your kids 2 out of 14 days. Like, this pain of, like, well, they're not, because we were developing that business. They were all growing. The business was growing. Their wages were growing. Their conditions were improving. So... And then you're kind of selling them, and then is the person I've sold this business to going to treat them the way I think they should be treated? And that was part of the process. We actually had another buyer in mind before we sold, and I spoke to the manager there, and he's like, I don't think that's the right way for I wouldn't enjoy that owner being the owner, and so we walked away from that deal before it even started because of the desires, and no one knows that. I guess it's not something I say for any credit, but it was really important.
These are the things that decide or that aid in decision making.
We've got
hinder decisions even.
You might have seen this if you were doing, I guess, if you've done that as much research as you have. We've got the 12 immutable laws, which are the rules in which we engage with customers and suppliers. We'd never really thought about using those 12 immutable laws as a lens in which to sell a business through. But once we started looking to sell the business, I was like, hang on a sec. these 12 rules have to be part of that as well. So you kind of like, because of those rules, we found a buyer that was really easy to deal with, super reasonable. The deal was done it was almost done over lunch at a handshake. And then I guess the creases of the contract got ironed out very simply without too much involvement from lawyers and accountants. And when they get involved in selling a business, it can get very rocky. Same with divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been divorced, but my parents are divorced, and I support a lot of men specifically that are going through divorce in, getting access to their children and fairly and everything else. As soon as lawyers get involved, it just turns to shit, right? Everyone has like, yep, I agree, that's fair, shake hands, and they're like, oh, do you know you could probably, and it's like, just stay out of it. So
because each party's getting paid to spike the other side
keep
up.
to keep, and I don't know, and I think, so it was really good. He was really great to deal with, and we still have a business relationship now. So Railways, which is now SA Landscape Supplies, is a LawnHub reseller and one of our strongest resellers. So, it's important that when selling a business that you both walk away going, I think that was fair. Like, no one got ripped off. You've got your multipliers, but then when you go through that due diligence process, if you do, that's when you've got these lawyers or consultants just ripping shit apart, and you're like, let's just finish the deal. Yep. Like, what's 1%? Like, just, and then we can all move on. So, yeah.
A lot of the guys that listen in, I don't think they've ever experienced or understand the complexity that's involved, or even the process. Can you nail out the process for us from due diligence to the deal to obligations afterwards?
So buying and selling is obviously the same thing. It's just two sides of.
Yep, but from the selling perspective, because I think a lot of people, I suppose the backing to that is. Everybody who turns over $1 million thinks their company's worth $1 million.
Yeah. All right. I'll try and give you the
saleable asset as well.
I'll try and give you the most clippable version, the shortest possible version, because there's a lot to it. But the reality is, when we're looking at buying businesses, we're looking at businesses that are operating under management. So I don't want to buy a business where I now have another job. And so for us, we'd probably have to look at 4 million turnover minimum now, because that's generally when there's management involved.
And under management specifically where the director is not active?
They're not required. Yep. So they might be active, but like Railways, as an example, was owned by Jefferies Group. They had a board and a chairman of the board that would, I guess, send their strategic direction down to Luke, who was the manager at Railways and still is. He would then roll that out. So he'd have a budget that he'd have to adhere to, and he'd run the business with the support of the board and, I guess, senior people. $1 million plumbing business where the dude or dudette is still actively working on site or even working in the office is not necessarily saleable unless it's to another plumbing business that wants to buy their staff effectively and maybe their customer base, because that person that's running whatever role they're running, it might be the wife's doing an admin role and the husband's actually on site, or an inverse of that. I'm very aware that women can plumb. Those wages sometimes get put back into the value of the deal, and if they're not, then they have to be taken away. So, because you'd have to replace those people, and you know this. So, we would look at 3 times multiplier, and when I say a 3 times multiplier of the profit of the business, so EBITDA, and so Railways, for example, might have had, and I'll use loose numbers, not for my sensitivity, but for their sensitivity, because I'm quite open with numbers, whereas a lot of people aren't.
It's no longer your company as well.
No, well, even when I bought it, like Jefferies Group were quite sensitive with confidentiality. Like I filmed the whole process. I actually made a documentary of the buying of Railways, and it just never came out because there was too much shit that got cut, and it just became a useless thing. But there's an hour and a half video of me at meetings and the emotions of buying it, and negotiations, and me like, the deal's done, fuck this, I'm over it. Like there's a lot of that.
Yep.
So if the business makes $100,000 a year after all expenses, and you work on a 3 times multiplier, then the argument would be that the business is worth $300,000 plus the value of any plant and equipment and stock. So we would value the stock at cost, because that's what it's worth, unless there's dead stock. So a plumbing business might say, so there's a business that that's running that's turning over $1 million. They make $100,000 a year. The directors are both getting paid market fair wages. So what it would cost to replace them in the open market in reality. cool, then the 100 grand's real, right? You can sell that business, but the person that buys it either has to replace those roles, which was the director, or they might stay on and obviously have an earn out period or whatever. Then there's stock at value, or stock at whatever it costs, but sometimes the stock might be worthless. So you might have pieces of copper that they're not up to like the standard anymore. They've rusted.
The majority of the inventory isn't going to be tracked anyway. No. It's going to be sat there as scrap.
So they'll say, whereas for our business, it was an inventory business. So the inventory does come into play. So the landscape supplies yard at the time, I think there was $140,000 in stock when we took over. That'll get stock taked at settlement. So there'll be a rough idea. The bank, because there's always going to be there's not always going to be a bank involved, but there's in most cases going to be a bank involved. They'll pre-approve a loan for the value of the business. That doesn't change after due diligence, and I'll talk about that in a sec. The value of the stock is moving because it's a moving number, because it's a business that's an ongoing concern or a going concern. And then the value of the trucks, which doesn't change. And the value of the trucks and the plant and equipment for us, there's two ways of valuing that. Obviously, you can just kind of go, this is what we think they're worth. And like you would buying a car, or you can involve someone like Pickles Auctions to come out and actually do a valuation. In our case, we had a pre-agreed price. We had to manipulate things a bit. So we had Pickles involved to value the vehicles because the bank needed to have something to loan against, because the business was not as profitable as maybe the bank might have been comfortable with, and I wasn't willing to put collateral up against like a house. And so that's it. You've got your profit multiplier, your stock and your plant. You've also got staff entitlements that need to be taken into account. So we had a really large chunk of the buy was tied up in staff, long service leave and annual leave. Long service leave and annual leave was like 6 figures. And the great thing about that is you take that responsibility on at a deduction, at a 30% deduction, because that was the tax rate at the time. And that might need further explanation. And if you're looking at doing this, talk to your accountant. But sick leave is something that you just have to take. And so that's a really interesting one that a lot of people don't think about, because there's a lot of sick leave. We had guys that were there 20 years. So you think about the sick leave that they've accumulated, you take that on as a liability, but there's no number that changes hands for it. So whereas the 120 odd grand that was tied up in long service leave and annual leave, I could reduce that off the price of the deal. So say the deal's $1 million, you only have to settle at 880 because the 120 you're actually taking, which was we were effectively borrowing money off the staff to buy the business, but you don't think about it like that.
Yep.
And so we settle, we do that, and then you go run the business. Due diligence is a process where you might come to an agreement on the value of the business and so you'll agree in principle, and you'll go potentially into a period of exclusivity. And then there's due diligence, which is where your accountant and advisors and management team will go through all of the numbers with a fine-tooth comb and try to work out ways, in a lot of cases, to screw the buyer over and make the deal better to screw the seller over and make the deal better for the buyer. I'm not a due diligence guy. I was like, I'm not doing this shit. I can't be fucked. Let's do this. And my accountant's like, can you please just do some due diligence? And I'm like what? He goes, what would be a number that if you found a problem would be a reason to walk away from the deal? And I said, 50 grand. He goes, go find $50,000. Go find a $50,000 problem. And that's a very simple way of probably explaining due diligence.
What about once the sale is made? I hear a lot of horror stories about owners getting dragged in, getting contractually obligated. There's performance metrics that need to be upheld. What's life like after selling railways?
It obviously depends on the deal. For us, the deal was a walk in, walk out. In this situation, Jeffries was a supplier to railways, so we had an ongoing relationship, and I still do. Lachlan and I are quite close. The Jeffries Group are the major sponsor of the Landscape Association, of which I'm the president of, so we still have a working relationship there, but we're also friends. So that was kind of easy. You couldn't not have that. But for example, when I sold the business to SA Landscape Supplies, I walk away. There's no earning out. There's no earn out, which would be a period. So for a plumber that might sell their business, they might have a 6-month or a 12-month period where they have to stay on board. They get paid the salary that they were on, and they have to meet certain KPIs around profit, or they might not get paid their amount. So they might get, say, 80% up front and the 20% of back end. We didn't have any of that. It was just because, and I think that's probably one of the good things about buying a small business that is under management. There's no expectation. There was no way any of them were going to stay on board and do anything. And to be honest, I didn't want them there either. I listen to a lot, but I'm a dictator when it comes to how we operate businesses. I'm not looking to have a vote on it. So to have them there wouldn't have, well, and also they were selling it because it was underperforming. So, you know,
we don't need them there if it's underperforming.
what are they going to do, right?
And you'd had experience, so it's in your circle of competence.
Yeah, and it wasn't underperforming because they didn't know what they were doing. It was underperforming because they weren't spending any time on it. It was something they bought that they thought would help grow their market in the South, and they didn't realize that retailing is vastly different from manufacturing and wholesaling. They thought they could just do it, and it just didn't click. So, but yeah, it depends on the business. Like you could sell your business to someone, and there might be a 2-year earnout where a friend of mine sold his business recently and stayed on as the CEO, and he shouldn't have because he's worse than me. He's just like, it's my way or we're not doing it. But he's also very like, if you disrespect me with that kind of stuff, then I'm out. And the way they were managing him wasn't very smart, and they lost him. But I don't think he had any metrics tied to it. Then another guy I know who sold his business for circa 100 mil. He had big chunks, like $20 million, like a year later, that were based on the numbers continuing to be delivered at that rate. So it really depends on the deal. Obviously, it's hard because if you've got clients or people that watch or listen to this that are interested in selling their business and they think it's worth a certain amount, a lot of it will get chewed up in advice, right? Like if you're going to make $100,000, if you've got contracts being drawn up, accounting, like our accountant's involvement got a lot higher, and we've got a great relationship with our accountant. So he's used to doing these deals with me, and they got a strong big team, and it doesn't cost me as much because my deals are quite smooth, right? And I've only done one in and one out, but it's very much like handshake deal, shortest contract possible, do the right thing, which is one of our 12 immutable laws, and then we kind of just carry on. And I think if you can get a reputation in the market for doing deals well, you'll get more deals because people will come to you and go, hey, I want this. But I guess a final piece of advice for anyone that's in the trade space that is looking to sell their business, it's really important to try to have consistent and strong records for an extended period of time, at least 3 years. The multiplier you're going to get might be 3. My accountant argued with me about the railways multiplier. He's like, it's 2.2 currently, it's not 3. I'm like, I don't care. We've done a deal at 3. That's where I'm like, 3 is very standard. But I think because the cost of money was in a certain place, like as in interest rates, and the world was like, I guess, unstable. Or I didn't agree with a lot of what he was saying, but he was saying it's 2.2, it's 2.2. But then if you buy a company like Google or Coca-Cola, it might be 30 or 50, right? So the multiplier moves. But in our space, like normal real world $0 to $5 million businesses, it's probably going to be 3. Unless you own some proprietary, like LawnHub's vastly different. LawnHub could be 8 because the brand is so strong, and you're selling the brand and the depth of that. But for a services-based business, I think you're going to get 3. So have your records nice and clean. If you are, and I'm not suggesting anyone would be because it's not the right thing to do, but if you're taking cash, it might be a good idea to start putting the cash back through the business so that there's a real world
other rules
number. But all your listeners and clients would be doing that, so I'd have no concerns there. And then document as much as you can. So if someone's going to buy the business, and I've seen a sale recently, a landscape business that sold here with, 30 staff. The value of that business becomes higher, or the sale will be easier if you've got good policies and procedures around how to manage everything. Because in some cases, you've got this, former lawyer, accountant, money man that comes back from some other country. This is an example of what I've seen recently multiple times, and they've got a bit of cash and they want to buy a business. They want to come back to South Australia. They've been in Singapore or they've been in Hong Kong. They've made some money. They want to buy a business. They don't really care what it is because they know how to run businesses because they've been in the corporate, M&A kind of world. And they go looking and they're like, well, this one's under management. So that would be one good thing. Get it under management, have good policies and procedures, have a profitable 10% or more business. It's very desirable and consistent for at least 3 years. And then I guess some cultural difference examples, like, this is why, like the guys from Adelaide Hills Lawns and Gardens, like this is why we have low recruitment costs and strong retention of staff. And we would encourage you to continue doing what we're doing, which I don't see happen all the time. Obviously, when we bought Railways, we changed the culture of how we manage things. We start celebrating work milestones. We don't do that as well as we should. birthdays, simple stuff. Like we'd have cakes for our staff for birthdays, which was, I think it's a nice thing to do, and everyone gets some cake. And so with 40 staff, we're having 40 cakes a year, more now because we have to buy 2 cakes at some locations, but and celebrate their successes and invest time in them and training. And then, if you can, and if you're buying the business, if you're buying the business because it's doing well, it's very highly advisable to keep doing what was being done well, and then maybe add your accent, which is what we do. We kind of run it through a filter. I don't know if we'll buy another business for a little while, but we're inactively looking at irrigation stores outside of South Australia, in Brisbane mainly. But it could be a couple of years. The main focus for me now is LawnHub USA. So
excellent. I want to press on the difference between a 3x multiplier from a normal business, a hypothetical 8x multiplier for LawnHub.
Yep.
The key there was brand, and I've heard you say that brand is all that matters.
It is all that matters, and I didn't know this until about 3 years ago. I mean, there's a few different directions I could go in, but reputation matters, right? Like who you are and how much people trust you, and if you do what you say you're going to do, and your integrity. So if you can look at a business through the same lens and go, WaterPro has a very strong brand, but we don't own anything unique, right? We sell other people's products, and we're at the mercy of those manufacturers. And if they ever turn off the tap, we can't buy Rainbird controllers or we can't buy Hunter sprinklers. The business is effectively dead. Like, unless you can gear up to start your own manufacturing of irrigation equipment overnight, which is vastly close to impossible, then you're in trouble. LawnHub has a brand, but it also controls its own products. So LawnHub sells LawnHub, WaterPro sells everyone else's stuff. And so I wasn't really conscious of it. I always knew that having WaterPro as a strong brand really mattered to us because people trust WaterPro. Mm-hmm. But we're at the mercy of others. And I think now I'm 42. I think I was talking to one of my team members about it earlier today. At the start in life and business, you're kind of just aggressively playing offense. And one of the dangers of getting older and acquiring and accumulating some wealth is you start to play defense, and it takes the edge off you. And I don't like it. I hate that I've lost my edge a bit, because it's like, well, that could cost, you could lose it all. And especially when you're married and you've got children. And I've had conversations. What was it? There was a deal I was going to do, and my wife said, I trust you and I love you, but please don't put our house at risk. And it was like, oh man, because I can't remember the deal, but we walked away. Oh, that was all right. We had a contract on a winery. We're going to start a wedding function center, but it was just a bad deal. And she's like, and she, whatever I did, she would have supported me on, but it made me go, oh, yeah. And as a single person, I probably would have done it.
But it's the total cliche of betting the house.
Yeah, it would have been. And we were like, I had negotiated a 97% LVR. It was just really dangerous on a commercial property. It was just stupid. But LawnHub, so it actually stemmed from a conversation I had with Gary Vee. So back in, I don't know when it was, 14 or 15, Gary Vee was speaking in Brisbane, and you could buy a ticket to go have dinner with him. So I ended up having dinner with him and 9 others, and it's like a 3-hour dinner, and you can just ask questions and just listen to everyone. And he kind of went around the table and he said to me, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, I've got this irrigation business called WaterPro. We sell this, and this. He's like, do you own the products? I'm like, no. And he's like, you're fucked. Get out. Like, do not do that. He goes, you are the middleman, right? The internet is now the middleman, which anyone that follows Gary Vee would have heard 100 times. So Amazon and eBay eventually will cannibalize what you do unless you can get those products. And I think because irrigation's more complex than some other things like Nike shoes or, I don't know, bread, we've got a bit more time. But I know people that own sports stores, and they're getting the same. They're actually going through it now where, say, ASICS or Nike are like, we don't need you anymore. Mm-hmm. You're not Rebel. We're shutting your account. We're selling direct. They take that margin out. You know, you can buy something on Amazon now and it's delivered within 4 hours in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, because they've got their distribution centres there. And so I thought about that a lot over the years that followed. And LawnHub wasn't the brainchild of that. LawnHub was kind of around, it happened afterwards, but then I had this kind of click moment where I was like, oh, this is what he means. Sell products that you own and invest in your brand, and then no one can take that away from you. So that's why I consider LawnHub to have a higher multiplier, especially as we move towards selling in the US. There's a lot of governance in the US which we're having to deal with. But once you get on the other side of that, there's so many hoops you'd have to jump through to try and compete with LawnHub. But you're also never going to be LawnHub because it's its own brand, and we own the trademark and the domains and everything that we need. So I think the harder that is for someone to replicate that, the higher the multiplier is. So at the moment, LawnHub's brand is stronger than their products. So the products that we sell, I would argue you can buy the same quality product from multiple different suppliers and you'd be happy. You'd be getting the same results. The brand's strong enough that we might get a 5 times multiplier, and I don't know, and I'm not looking to sell it, and it hasn't been tested. The next thing for me to grow that multiplier would be to start having unique formulations around the products that I sell. So similar to, say, a Johnson & Johnson or a Pfizer or a Moderna or a Procter & Gamble, where you actually have the brand, because the name like Windex really matters. People trust that brand, but also that the formulation that you actually have for how it works is completely unique, uncopyable, trademarked, protected, patented. So I never really thought about that much until recently. So when I say brand is all that matters, that's what I mean, because if you're going to invest lots of time and money, and we do, like as business owners, we invest so much time, which is worth more than money, but then also like LawnHub spends between $1.5 and $2 million a year on advertising. Why would you do that to advertise someone else's brand? Because you don't think about it, but WaterPro spent all this time, and we still do it, and I want to smack my head into a wall when I think about it, that we go out to see a local council to try and sell one of the brands that we represent. And we take a clip of the ticket, which is a margin, and then at any moment, that supplier, and it's happened recently, have gone, we're going to go direct because we feel like we were at risk of losing the deal. So we've gone direct. And then they've just cut their reseller network out, and the reseller network's gone. And the internet's made it very easy to do that. So that's, I guess, a very long explanation of why I think brand is all that matters.
Well, we see the solar guys, we see the aircon guys. They're advertising Daikin, Mitzi. They're advertising Tesla batteries. Not that you can go out and that you should go out and create your own Tesla batteries, but taking more time to think. I always favour the trade and service space. Taking more time to think about the actual brand that we're curating instead of just ABC Proprietary Limited or ABC Electrical. Really, and the Christmas, January, February period is a great time to do it because work does slow down. Is go deep on what is the branding components, what is the message behind the brand that's going to last the test of time.
And also, based on the history of your relationship with that brand, which brands are most likely to still be here in 10 years and still supporting you? So the Daikin, whatever example, have they, or have the parent company that owns that company ever had a situation where they have gone direct or started installing them themselves or whatever? Like paving's a great example. Landscape supplies yards sell pavers. Companies like formerly Boral would sell pavers. They would then sell them direct if they wanted to, but then they also had a supply and install. So Best and Boral all do it, because as soon as one does, the rest do. And so which brands have maintained integrity? And I would say Steel is a really good example, like the blower chainsaw company, Steel. They won't sell in hardware shops. They only sell through their own stores. So you can look at that and go, well, that's a brand that sticks to their rules and their integrity. So if I am a reseller and I want to get a franchise where I'm selling that brand or any other of the brands, I'm going to choose that one because historically they've stuck to their values and I trust that they're going to keep doing that. Whereas, it might not be a good idea to start reselling a paver that's being sold direct to your customers at the same price you're buying, because you're just going to be fighting against your suppliers, which is crazy. So
it's going to turn out to be a zero-sum game. You can be kicked out of it eventually.
Well, you'll do all the heavy lifting, and then when they don't need you anymore, you're gone. And I really hope, because I'm a big believer in the ledger of morality, and a lot of times I get caught up fighting fights that aren't my fight because I see that's something that I don't think is right and I get involved. And that's why I'm the president of the Landscape Association. It's something I don't have time for, but the way that the president prior to the last one was acting, I was in strong disagreement with, and I'm a big believer that if you have an opinion, don't talk about it unless you're going to do something about it. So I went and did it. But I really hope that some of these brands that take a shit on their existing support networks get really hurt buy that, because I think that until that happens, they don't get punished for it. And I'm not a religious person. Like, I don't have I guess a traditional God, but I'm kind of a karmic person, and I believe that if you do the wrong thing will happen. If you do the right thing will happen. And I think over a long enough time horizon, they'll eventually get the punishment. But I'd like to see it, because I'm like,
Sooner rather than
you
later.
did the wrong thing. Like, you know, I mean, if say someone like Hunter or Rainbird decide that they don't want to have a dealer network involved anymore, then I would say the right thing to do is to give these stores 3 to 5 years notice and say, we're going to start going direct to the end user. But they won't. They'll just start doing it, and they'll start lying about it. I'm not suggesting either of those brands do or will, but brands that, whatever the brand is, brand X, don't even use that one, then Elon will come after me, but brand whatever, if they do it the right way, I think, I mean, doing the right thing is always the right thing, right? So, yeah.
I've been watching the In the Car with Clint series.
How deep are you?
It's hard to stop.
There's
man.
a lot
It's
in
really
there.
hard to stop. I admire the courage it takes to drive to work in the morning, to take your camera out and to shoot what's on your mind, because we all have those ideas and we're all thinking, oh, fuck, everyone needs to hear about this.
Yeah.
And to actually document it, it's, I commend you for it. I want to hear.
I didn't think it was going to last as long as it did, and I've had a few people like, "You're still going," but
yeah, it's gold. I want to get some takeaways from a couple of them. I picked a handful of them that I think will be quite special.
Okay.
There is so much power in getting out of your office. Yep. What do we mean?
So for me, I love people, and I love connecting, and I love human interaction probably more than anything. And I think for me specifically, if you get, it's very easy to stay in an office and stare at a computer and do budgeting and do copywriting and refine ads. And I think until you get out and actually kind of press flesh and shake hands and I'm face-to-face wins the race all the time. Like, even more than a phone call, I'd rather have a meeting. You can watch the body language of a human. You can understand their reaction to something if you get good at it, and you're only going to get good at it by doing it more. And so I like to even drive, I'll go to Lonsdale where we've got a store, and I see things on the way. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, why is that there? Because I'm quite analytical about everything. But then you might see opportunity, because you'll drive past a landscaper. I did on the way here. I have to go back to find it because I didn't have time. But there was people putting loam on irrigation on the street down here. Mm-hmm. Now, if I didn't come here, I wouldn't have seen that. That could be our next $50,000 a year client, because you're seeing stuff. And that's just my example. But there's other examples where if you get out and you start, and I hate networking for the sake of networking, like standing there and handing out business cards to try and sell logos. A room full of 100
people handing out business cards is the most superficial version.
The purest forms where you're like, hey, I think you'd like this person. I think you've got similar values, similar ideas. We'll have lunch or a coffee. That kind of stuff.
Yep.
You'll get so much more value out of than sitting in your office. So there's some examples. Walking my floor and like watching what the team are doing around manufacturing of fertilizer, packing boxes. I'm asking questions like, why should we change that? How come we're doing that? I think it just, as a leader, you probably can't lead at the best of your ability without getting out there and absorbing what's going on outside of your office. That's the gist of it.
There's elements of not only just showing face, but showing that you've got a certain set of standards and that you care and that you notice things and you notice the people as well.
Yep.
I've got a large team, and I've seen the repercussions of what happens when leadership not necessarily pulls away, but aren't visual or aren't visualized, aren't seen. And the amount of change that can happen in 30 days with a CEO making technicians coffee. It has just little weird colloquial things that make the world of difference.
I think in that example, it has to be genuine. And I agree. Like, we have, it has to be what works for you, right? So tomorrow we're having lunch. LawnHub I'm trying not to do it monthly, so it's not expected, but regular enough that it matters. We're having lunch together because we can. It's a business that can stop. Mm-hmm. My retail irrigation stores can't, so we have to do things that are different. But by doing that, it gives people a moment to actually build a human connection with a leader, but also to voice any concerns in a very informal environment, to just go, stop. Like, can I talk to you? Like, I had lunch with Izzy today, who's one of my most recent media staff, and it was probably an hour lunch. And all new staff I have lunch with in the first week, ideally. but it's now the first month a little bit because of how big we've got, and I'm traveling a bit more. But that gives me an opportunity because I'm not in a recruitment position anymore. Mostly I'll hire more senior staff, but the people that are being hired below my senior staff, I don't meet them until that lunch. And so it gives me an opportunity to build a relationship with them, to say, like, I am human and I'm here and this is my mobile number. And if you need me, call me. You know, the business is quite big. We've got access to like finance brokers, lawyers. If you car yards, like I know people that own probably between them 20 car yards. If you need a car, I can find you one and you won't go through the bullshit. They'll just give you the proper price. You know, like you buy enough cars, you're just like, can you send me a quote for a new Toyota? That's it, right?
Yep.
And so, but also I set the tone for this is the standards, this is the 12 immutable laws. And if you ever want to leave, come and tell me and I'll help you find another job. Like you don't have to stay here, but just give me notice and I'll help you and I'm not going to fire you. Like that, I really like to do that because I think not a lot of people, some people just won't fit and they're going to want to leave. I don't like the whole quietly quitting or abandonment with exactly 2 weeks, especially in roles that are hard to rehire, like videographers and editors who are all very highly skilled and elite. So I think in that example, if the CEO is making coffees for the technicians because he read it in a book and he's just started doing it, but he doesn't like doing it and he hates them all, then it's the wrong thing to do. But if it comes organic and that person's building rapport, I think it's the best thing you'll ever do.
The ulterior motive to it is he was wondering what's changed.
Yeah.
Since I've been away, what's changed?
This is in your business?
Yep. And he's gone down onto the floor and gone, the first way I can find out is to see exactly what people's attitude's like at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's the best way to understand.
And if they're there, which is not ideal that you're watching, but it does highlight the ones that might not be getting there on time or that are, getting to
everything
work and
around
going
you
to the toilet
the
for the first 12 minutes. Yeah.
Whether the uniform's worn, whether they're, happy, sad, upset, crazy.
And if you can go in there
music.
and not attack them and be like, hey, I noticed you guys have got some like ratty shirts. How long ago was it that you got new ones? And you're like, I don't know, we don't really have a regularity of that. So then he, as a CEO, can go, okay, so we should probably be looking at a budget on uniforms per person every 12 months. Yep, cool. And then we've got a form and then bang.
Exactly.
It's sorted. And they're like, holy shit. So when I told him something last, he did something about it. Oh, well, then I can tell him stuff.
Everything got better.
Yeah.
Yep. Just through a little bit of communication.
Yeah, coffee's a big part of we've got twin group head barista quality coffee machines in every location. It's a massive part of our culture.
Caffeine's good for efficiency.
Yeah. You got to find that balance, right?
Okay, the next one. Touch it once.
Yes. I actually, I don't know where that started, but I was at home and I put a plate on the bench above the dishwasher and just went, what are you doing? The dishwasher's right there. Just put it in the dishwasher. And I'm really bad at whether or not it's undiagnosed ADHD or whatever, but there's a lot of open loops all the time. And I've hired people around me to support that, to close off stuff, because I'm a very... I'll come up with all these ideas and I'll usually finish about 80% of something and then I'll move on and then they have to kind of come in.
We're all very much wired that way.
Yeah.
Like you fill up your 1 litre water bottle, but what can I do while it's filling up?
That's right. And it's the same with like, I'll be like, I need to wash some clothes, but then the water, I can't do that and shower. So I'll do the first but the irrigation system. So, and I'm thinking way too much about it rather than just doing one thing at a time. Regardless, I just remembered this. It might have been a YouTube video or a guru that said touch it once, and it might have been even just a reel. And I was like, yeah, no shit. So I just started doing a bit more of that, like hanging a jacket up or putting my shoes away or having a spot for my keys and putting them there, because when I didn't do that, I couldn't find stuff, or it would just be cluttered, and it still is, and we're not perfect at it, especially with my brain. And then I was like, there's probably something in that for business, right? And it's tied a little bit to there's two parts to it. So can we just complete what's required right now? Like email can be quite challenging and text and whatever else, but is it something that we can deal with right now and just answer it, delegate it, delete it, whatever acronyms you kind of use to manage your time? And then the back half of that, which is something that I've spoken to my management team and my wife, who is my assistant as well, is if you get me not doing that, the question I need you to ask me is, what is the single piece of information that you would need to make this decision now? And I wasn't doing a lot of that. And there's a lot of melting pots of ideas sitting everywhere and all these open loops, but a lot of them can be finished by just getting it done now. And if it can't be done now, there's obviously you can't make a decision about it. So what's the piece of information that you would need to make the decision? And by doing that, we tend to get more done quicker. And I'm not perfect at it. And I think in that video I say something around it's still an idea. It's ideating still. But and there are going to be things that you can't just touch once, right? Like I'm building a house, right? But you could do, like, go lodge the plans or order the wood. Just do it now. Do it now. So rather than procrastinating. It's probably designed to protect a procrastinative ADHD brain. So yeah.
One day we'll get a diagnosis on it.
I don't really want a diagnosis. I think whatever's wrong with me is right with me, and it's a superpower. Like,
something's working.
Like, I don't want my life to be different. And I think if I medicated for focus, then something else would fall down, right?
Yep.
Like equal and opposite reaction. So
Yep. I like the idea that a lot of the people listening probably want to start something else. They probably think that I'm not going to do this forever. They're probably in a position where they are the genius with 1,000 helpers. I know that you are big on developing these internal training programs and these processes and procedures. Then we get the business coaches of today going, you need systems, you need processes, with no fucking description about what it is. Talk to me about some of the internal governance. What are some of the systems that a managing director, a GM, maybe a project team or an operations team, what are some of the things that we should have in place with this kind of leadership team?
I'll start firstly by saying we are definitely not perfect at this, and we are a long way from it. And when I first started what was Fluid Designs, which became WaterPro over 15 years ago, the plan was to start documenting things straight away. And we never did a good job of it, and now there's a lot of gaps and we're working on it. But at a high level, there's probably, I guess, if you go to finance, that's the first thing that came to my mind. You want to have almost two-person authorization on payments and that kind of thing. So we manage our banking, obviously, by someone loading payments and someone authorizing it. So that's I guess a piece of governance that's in place. I think in the absence of like super intense documentation, having some rules around how you want your business to be run and how you want your team to engage with society, suppliers, customers, each other, is a really quick way of managing it. So we've got the 12 immutable laws, which were these rules that were developed off the back of me reading a book called The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz, which is
He's
really
fantastic,
really good book.
Surface level author, as in entry level author.
Profit First and Pumpkin Plan were two of the first books that I read. I think the first book I ever read was Built to Sell, and then it kind of started my journey into listening. I don't read, I listen to audiobooks. But we developed these 12 immutable laws, which my team used to make decisions. So it's like a decision, it's not a framework as such, but it's like read through them, and before you even get through the 12, you'll know what to do. And I'm comfortable with my staff making a lot of decisions. I don't micromanage and get involved. There's some stuff that I'll weirdly get involved in, and they're like, why do you care about this so much? And I'm like, because I just want it to be this way. Like,
I saw it and I have to do it.
well, like we had a staff lunch, the LawnHub's lunch last month, and the tables weren't laid out how I wanted them. I wanted a long table, like a family Christmas kind of thing, and they had like these cafe tables with 4 people. I'm like, this is not what I wanted. Yep. But I didn't tell them that, so my fault. But yeah, from a procedural standpoint, we're probably 15% towards being great. We've got, it's like that whole, everyone knows what to do, but it's not documented, and everyone's learnt from other people. And so I think if we can, we're looking at different platforms at the moment, between School, which is Alex Hormozy's new community. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, my guys will use School.
Yep. So we're looking at using School to manage training internally. It'll be all video because that's my best form. I don't want to write stuff. I'd rather talk stuff.
School's fantastic for the classroom module.
Yeah. So we want to do that, but then we're also looking at building some wikis for information around other stuff. So we're not great at it. Everyone's kind of learnt from each other. It's really important to me, and I guess why you're probably asking is I've probably talked about it a little bit recently. We're now a $17 to $25 million business, depending on the day. We can't get to 100 doing what we've done. We need to do something different, and it's going to be heavily driven by strong onboarding and strong education. So that start period, like when you're at the highest risk of people jumping off.
Yep.
And having all those documentation. So then I'm not the one that has to do the training. I'll be the one building the training with my team, but then they'll obviously be able to go watch that in their leisure. And I think that's probably that will be what helps us get to 100 million, because WaterPro, there's no educated counter staff for an irrigation business out there. We have to build them. Like obviously plumbing and carpentry, there's obviously a process of apprenticeships that kind of occur, and then people move into the field. There's still a skills shortage, and I'm deeply across that. But irrigation retail salespeople do not exist. So we have to build that, and I think that's our next bottleneck is policies and procedures. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. For Build Clean, in order for us to go interstate, we need to be able to map what worked here. Yeah. So on the people training component, we still use an internal video structure on a base of levels. So somebody prior to day one, they've watched 4 hours worth of content on our vehicles, the way they're stocked, the tools, how to use them, how to acid wash, pH levels, all kind of shit that no one teaches a cleaner how to clean. And then we went through on different levels up to the managerial component. And we also run like a business operating system that brings information together. So there's a few fragmented components, but I want guys to start thinking about not necessarily just collecting Google Docs, but creating something that is actually live, that is actually used, that isn't just filed away.
Do you sell any products in that business?
No. All labour.
There's a massive opportunity for you to have your own cleaning range if you could be bothered. But
there was 2 components to it. The main plan, the strategy is to expand on only what we know until we get to the largest amount of footprint, and then expand out from there.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. Products, especially, I'm so bullish on liquids that are recurring, like selling liquids that are recurring. So like window, like stone sealers, like acid washing, whatever it might be, car washing material. Like it takes most of my brain time is about like what's the thing that kills LawnHub in my mind, like as in not what competes with LawnHub, but what's so much more profitable than LawnHub. That's where our attention goes. But anyway, not a conversation for today.
It's the liquid. There's something about the juice.
It's just high margin and then recurring.
Yep.
If you look at the products that the biggest consumer brands in the world sell, a lot of it's pastes and liquids and makeups and perfumes and
Liquid's an interesting one as well, because people that scoop powder or scoop granules will scoop it. If you give people liquid and a pouring cup to pour it in, they just pour it freehand.
I'm deeply aware of that, and we have to be careful because we say it all the time. Like, if one is good, 2 is not better. Like, you will kill shit.
More is not more.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Okay. What does the future hold for LawnHub? We know the numerical components, but what does it look like?
So, I guess LawnHub will continue to grow, and I think LawnHub's success globally is kind of a foregone conclusion now, barring any issues with governance and legally being able to be sold. But it will continue to grow in Australia at a rate of, I'm going to say, 200% per annum for a little while until we get, because we're so small. Like the fertilizer industry in Australia is in the billions, and we're in the tens of millions, or like just touching, so almost single millions. So I think that'll keep happening. It's a really challenging game to continue to keep building ad creative to keep up with that. But that's what we do every day. I started writing my goals out for 2025 a couple of weeks ago. I've just got my windows of my whiteboards, and so I'm writing down like 2025 goals. And the only thing that kept coming up was launch LawnHub in the USA, and that's all. I guess if I was only allowed to do one thing next year, it would be to grow LawnHub into the USA and start supplying fertilizer throughout the United States and maybe into Canada and beyond. Canada's a really challenging one, but I truly believe that LawnHub USA could be a $500 million a year business. And so anytime I'm spending on other stuff, if you look at it purely on dollars, and it doesn't have to be because there's stuff that I enjoy doing as well, is this a $500 million opportunity? Is that you're spending time on right now? Because if it's not, and your goal is to do 100 million, then you should only be doing this. So I've got 2 trips to the US in February. We've got meetings. I've got meetings as soon as next week with people that can help me manufacturing fertilizer. We don't manufacture our own products yet. And then we just have to learn about governance in the US. So you can't, in Australia, you can just start selling fertilizer. You don't have to apply for any permits or whatever. With chemicals you do, so herbicides and insecticides.
Or EPA licensing type stuff.
AVPMA, so Australia, what was AV? I don't know what it is. But yeah, AVPMA, they basically handle the regulations around, so you have to have, like labels have to have certain size fonts and it has to have certain wording on it. And they take a clip of the ticket as well. I think they take a 0.3% of your turnover or something. Of
course they do.
So you have to report that.
Yep.
Of course.
Naturally.
And look, I get it. It actually helps us because it makes it harder for competitors to come into the space. But in America, our basic liquids, so our NPK liquid fertilizers, every product's formulation has to be registered in every state. And so if we've got 8 products, we've got 400 state registrations that need to be lodged, and so that's challenging. It also, like I keep saying, it builds a big moat around the castle, because if I have to go through that and it takes me 3 years, then it takes someone else, well, probably 6 years, but let's say 3 years if we say they're pretty handy with moving fast. So that's what's in store for LawnHub. We've got a national distribution deal in the mix at the moment, which it's not public yet, and so I won't say what it is, but it means we'll be in a lot of retail stores, maybe as soon as in a week. It's not a hardware store, so
by the time this comes out,
well, I don't know how. When does this come out?
It will be 2 weeks from shooting.
Yeah, it might be on shelves by then. So yeah, that's good. It brings its own challenges as well, because we've got a reseller network that I'm trying to protect as well. And some of the stores that we currently sell to are going to be close to this national chain. So I'm managing that as best as I can, in line with our 12 immutable laws, do the right thing, like no dicks allowed, that kind of thing. So I'll reach out to them individually. And the main one that I'm worried about, I've just said to him, like, I'll give you a lot of shit, like you can sell for nothing, and hopefully you make more money than the pain of having a competitor get it. But the deal's too good. And I said to him, if you tell me not to, I won't. And he's like, I can't do that, man. Like, this is too big. That's
the thing with building quality relationships and having open communication.
Yeah, and what the LawnHub portion of his business is so small. It's just a good thing for his business. Like, people come to his store to buy LawnHub, and while they're there, they might buy other stuff. So, but
it's a perfect segue into what are you building? What are you making? You know, we should add this in. Yeah.
Yep. Landscape supplies yards, that's the kind of thing they should be selling. You know, someone buys loam, doesn't have to be LawnHub, but what are you doing?
It probably should be. Yep. Say it again, LawnHub.
The smart play LawnHub, yeah. Get that SEO. Well,
you have obviously a lot on the go. What is a day in the life like?
So Monday to Friday is work. I wake up 7 hours after I go to sleep. So I'm pretty strict with, I need 7 hours, especially because I'm unhealthy at the moment. So 7 hours is the amount of sleep I need to be able to function. 6 is good if I'm not drinking and I'm eating healthy and I'm exercising. Most mornings, I'd say all mornings, unless I've got early meetings, I'll have breakfast. I don't eat breakfast, but I'll make breakfast for the kids and then I'll be with them. And then maybe 1 in 5 to 1 in 10, I'll take them to school. So I took the kids to school this morning. Well, the ones that aren't right. So my oldest rides his bike now, so he's gone. And then I'll head to Direct, which is where LawnHub is. And every day is different. I try to chock my days out with meetings. I don't really like doing stuff. I like talking to people. So yesterday, like, I had 2 meetings that were 5 hours. It just was like 5 hour block from one straight into another. But one was helping the guys from Adelaide Hills. Well, they helped me as well. Like, it works both ways. That I come up with ideas talking to them and vice versa. And the other one was the fertilizer guy. So I pretty much met from like 10 till 3. I'll be on Teams a bit answering questions. I'm pretty much able to work anywhere in the world now. And I'll be checking ad creative for LawnHub. That's a big part of my I guess, what I consider my needs. I'm I guess not a creative director, but I'm the talent for the commercials for LawnHub. So we'll record ads once a week. Friday I do the podcast for LawnHub. So 3 Fridays a month, we have barbecue breakfasts at our WaterPro stores.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to the breakfast in the morning, 7 till 10. So that might be Lonsdale, Kent Town, Dry Creek. And then I might go do something close to there. So last week I went to see a client down there. I still have some clients that I look after. So I have lunches with clients. And then I'm generally home pretty early. I don't have a long work day from a contact hours at work, but I'm then have dinner with the kids, get them to bed, and I might start working again at 8 till 10. I generally sleep 10 till 5, 10 till 6. And then because my wife's also my assistant and in charge of all of our governance, employee contracts and all this other shit. So she also probably works from 8 till 10 as well. And then Saturdays and Sundays is just sport. So my boys play baseball and basketball. They both play district. They're both really good. Like they Div 1 baseball players. My oldest is a bit probably more Div 7, Div 6, Div 7 basketball player. He'd probably hate me saying that, but he's going to have to make a choice at some point. So we have 2 baseball games and 2 basketball games and 2 basketball trainings. And my wife plays softball 1 or 2 games. So there's 8 sporting events from Saturday till Sunday. My daughter does nothing, thankfully. She just wingmans me and we kind of just drive around. So we split up. My wife might take one of my boys to one of his and I'll take him to the other. And then we try and meet back to watch. So the basketball games are kind of like 8 or 9 and 10. Baseball's 8 and 10 on the Sunday. So 8 o'clock Sunday morning.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It's
This is a whole
nuts.
other business.
It is nuts. It's Monday is like the day. Like I actually said to my team, I want them to make a shirt that says "Fuck Fridays" because I'm like Monday, I'm the boss, right? Saturday and Sunday,
You dictate everything.
I am
Monday.
a labourer
Yep.
in my household.
You're chauffeur.
Saturdays and Sundays,
Premium chauffeur.
Premium chauffeur. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And I've spoken to a lot of friends about it because they're like, it's just too much. Like, why do you do it? And I'm like, my kids are fit and healthy, well-adjusted, socially capable, athletically capable. And if that means I have to be busy on Saturdays and Sundays, then I'm all for it. Like, they will be ahead of the curve. Like Jack, my oldest, just won, I guess, a specialist subject award for PE. So they had their graduation last week. 2 kids for music, PE, Auslan, and something else won an award of the class. He won the sport one, right? He's just an all-rounder. He's handy. He's fit. You know, he sleeps well. Like our kids just go to sleep. It's bedtime, 8 o'clock, 7 or 8, depending on the age, and they're asleep because they're fucked. Like they do so much stuff. And I think that if that means that they don't get bullied, but they're socially capable, it means they're not overweight. It means they're not spending too much time on playing Fortnite. And I'm definitely not a tech phobe. Like I get they're going to be living in a world where they need to be capable, balanced like everything else. I'm all for it. So
Nice. It's a trade-off we're willing to make, isn't it?
yeah. Well, what else are we going to do? Like sit at home? You know, we'll clean your house, mow
You've
your
got to
lawns.
keep them entertained somehow. And I've got kids that aren't at the point where they don't have their own independent friends.
Yeah.
They don't do sleepovers yet. My job is fucking world's best entertainer on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's just go. What can we
Four's
do to keep
wicked
them
as
busy?
well. Like you'll never get that back, right? So any frustrations you have of parenting a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, but a 4-year-old specifically, like my twins are 7 now, and it's different, right? They still love you unconditionally, like worship you, like. But then 11's a bit different. And it's funny. This morning I dropped my kids off, and I took a present for the teacher because my oldest rides his bike, so I drove the present there and gave it to him. And I gave him a kiss in front of his mates to try and push him over the edge, like to see what he'd do. No one flinched.
Yep.
He gave me a kiss, and his mates just like, oh, all right, see ya. I'm like, okay,
Good.
interesting.
You just have to keep pushing the boundaries.
Oh,
as
I'll keep
parents, though,
doing
don't
it.
we?
Like,
You
I
have to
was trying to embarrass him because he's kind of cool, you know. He's not.
You want to level him.
He's not into girls or guys. I'm pretty sure girls, but he's not into that yet. Like a lot of his mates have got girlfriends, but he's just kind of like, no, just doing my thing, just playing sport, and all right, cool. So that's my week.
What about yourself personally? How do you go about this continuous phase of learning, seeking advice? How do you think about it?
So I'm always learning. So at the moment, I'm learning about TikTok ads. I'm learning about fertilizer manufacturing and how to blend fertilizer. I'm learning about regulations around governance of selling fertilizer, and all of it really comes down to what's the next thing I need to know to do this well, and then I go work it out. It's very rare that I'll pay to do a course. Like I went and did the Australian Institute of Company Directors course and didn't even hand the assignment in, so I didn't pass. But I just wanted to go meet people, and I met 2 people that I'm still connected with, so I was fine with it. But I'm learning by doing all the time, and whatever the business needs next, even building out Shopify, and you've been through all this, like how to build your shop, what colors work better. Like it's just testing and testing and testing and testing. So that's it, really learning, like just by doing. And I guess from an advice standpoint, I'm talking to as many people as I can. And I watched a podcast the other day. There's a guy called Dan Pena. Do you know who I'm talking about? He's a foul-mouthed multi-billionaire trader. Like he has a castle somewhere in Europe, and he just has people come and they do masterminds, and he's like really aggressive and rude. There's a really viral clip of him telling this lady to get fucked because she asked about global warming, and he just drilled her. He's like, it's bullshit. Anyway, he said, what was the piece of advice? What was I answering? Where do I get advice from? So he said, find the 5 people that have done what you are trying to do, dead or alive, at the highest level, not like in South Australia, but if they're in Europe, go find them and somehow get some time with them, work for them for free, whatever it is to do. So for my fertilizer thing at the moment, I'm seeking advice from people that have done it. So I've met with a guy yesterday who supplies chems. He's introducing me to a guy who runs a fertilizer business in Canada that makes his own. And so I start having those conversations. And then eventually I find if you're a decent human being and you do what you say you're going to do and you ask for help, people will help you. And so they'll start helping. So that's kind of how I find it.
Fantastic. It's nice to know that I follow a similar strategy. If I want to meet someone, I'll poke around and then I'll get directly into them. I don't really want to study their course, their program. I just want to be like, you tell me the answers.
I'm struggling with that at the moment. Our team, we're in a mastermind for online advertising, and I don't want, like, they're talking to all of the people below the owner, and I'm like, I think it's $2,000 a month, so it's not much, but I'm like, I just want to talk to him for 10 minutes. I want him to tell me that the shit you're telling them is true, because I don't think it is. I think that you're parroting shit you've learned. It's not working. Our ad creatives not performing well enough, and they're like, well, have you filled this out? I'm like, I don't want to fill your fucking form out. I want to talk to the owner. So I get it. Like, and you'll learn more in 10 minutes, because I've got 5 questions I want to ask, and the 10 will be an hour, right? And then we'll develop a relationship, and then things will be different.
Yep. So. And they might have a connection. They might have, this is the thing. This is what I'm learning. Read this book. That's something that I love to know. Where did their, not only the fact component or their idea, that is one component, but where did the thought pattern come from? Where's the root source? And
I think you're probably not dissimilar to me, that you build rapport with people pretty quickly. And so you can actually develop what some would call a friendship, but a work friendship or a business friendship pretty quickly. And then they'll be like, actually, he's a decent person, or she's a decent person. If you need anything, let me know. I did enjoy talking to you. Like the guy that I met with yesterday, he's in his 60s. He doesn't need to talk to me. He's very well off. He doesn't work. He's kind of like an inactive director, but he's like, I really enjoyed like this. Like, it was good. We talked about life like this, right? But off camera, kids, life, like legacy. Are you going to leave inheritance to your kids? Are there rules about them working in the company? Like all these different things. And we'll probably have a relationship. Well, I might probably die before him the way I'm going, but until one of us dies.
Oh, okay. I think that leads in quite nicely. What is your definition of success?
I don't know. It's funny. I don't really think about it. I guess if you had to put something on it, like being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it without having to worry about the cost of time or money, I think success. There's heaps of different answers to that. Like, I think my kids, I thought like my kids moving out of home and not coming back would be success, right? I've been a successful parent. Like, I've given them the tools to leave and never have to come back. Always feel welcome to come back, but never need to come back. I think my success might be senior management in my business, getting offered jobs at other businesses, or going out and starting their own business because they've learned. Like, that's a success. As much as it sucks, that success, I think that, I guess if you look at it purely monetarily, hitting my goals is a success. You know, like getting to 100 million of turnovers, a thing that scares the shit out of me, but I would see that as a success. My kids winning awards is success. Like I think it's really hard to answer, but the first thing I said around doing what I want when I want, with no concern about the financial or the time cost, I think that's success.
That's like a fuck you freedom, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think about like, and we're quite sensible with money. We don't buy stupid shit. But I rarely log in to check bank balances. I scan my card without any fear. We're traveling to Japan in a week. We're able to fly business class. We're able to buy the accommodation that's more expensive because of the time of year. It doesn't matter. You know, that's because we've worked hard I've worked hard since I was 12, but you know, we've had businesses for 15 years and we've sacrificed heaps, and there's been moments of ridiculous anxiety and tears and fear and thinking about losing your house and whatever else. So I guess the success is coming out the other side of that being stronger. But yeah, I think that's a really hard question to answer, but that's a very big answer for it.
We're going to check in a year's time. And we're going to see if the definition has refined, and we're going to get a revenue update as well.
Well, it better be higher. I just sold 6 million. I think we'll catch that 6 this year, but yeah.
Should be easy money.
If I can do as long as I can get through the governance process in America fast, it could be very big.
Fantastic.
That's the hold up. Anyway.
Mate, I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
It's been awesome. Thank you.